Sean, thanks so much for joining me.
Thanks for having me, Amber.
Okay, so I have had a conversation with you recently at an event, and it was a fascinating chat about the history of Nokia Bell Labs and a little about what's happening right now in terms of some of the research you're doing in AI. But for those people who aren't familiar with Nokia Bell Labs, can you explain what exactly happens there?
Uh, yeah, well, what's been happening, I guess, for the last 100 years, it's a special year, as you know, right? I think that's a little bit why we were chatting. So Bell Labs is a research institute inside of Nokia, and we tackle a lot of the fundamental challenges for our Nokia and its business, right? Which is a telecommunication business. But we also think about the way the world is changing, how it's going to affect our business, how we're going to build out for the future, and we play a lot with the research and trying to think big thoughts, think beyond the current business cycles to really how is the world changing and how are we going to benefit both Nokia, but also the world and of course Canada, as we talked about. So
Well, I definitely want to talk about the future, but first, if you could just give us kind of an overview of what's happened over the past 100 years. No easy feat. What
yeah,
have been some of the
I'll
highlights?
just take up the next 2 hours. Yeah, I mean, if you don't know Bell Labs, you're probably best served going and checking it out, either through the Nokia web pages or Wikipedia or whatever. I mean, it's one of the most impactful research organizations, and I don't just say that because I work there. It's, so much of the modern world that we live in is because of Bell Labs. I mean, the transistor, of course, is famous. There's the horn antenna, which famously verified the Big Bang Theory. There's Unix, C++, lasers, optical communications, CNNs. I mean, Jan LeCun was famously at Bell Labs doing his work on recognizing digits. I mean, literally, the list just goes on and on and on. We're at our 10th Nobel Prize now. I don't even know the number of Turing Awards, even Oscars and Grammys, actually. I mean, it comes down to we think about the world. We're very invested in cutting edge science, but also making sure that we have real world impact. And so the type of people that work here are people that really want to change the world. And so um, yeah, we've ended up with this massive, I guess, history of impact and exciting stuff. So it's always, so one of the presidents of Bell Labs likes to pull out his cell phone from his pocket and, say like six of the inventions that I just mentioned, or, a few that I didn't really are, like, billions of transistors inside your cell phone, the camera, all this stuff doesn't work without Bell Labs in the picture.
Well, I have to say that we speak to a lot of people about AI on this show, and none of them to date have a 100-year history operating. So, congratulations, first of all. I know clearly this was before your time, but it's amazing to see this evolution. When we were chatting at a recent event, we talked a lot about what's happening today on the AI front with Nokia Bell Labs. You, of course, lead the AI research lab. What does that even mean, just for people who maybe aren't familiar with this idea of an AI research lab?
Yeah, I mean, well, AI and automation and mathematics and statistics are just so important in our business. I mean, when you think of telecommunication networks, they're driven by, a whole host of advanced algorithms. And so we've been thinking about artificial intelligence, from very basic stuff all the way through to generative AI, of course, now. And how do we build these things? How do we optimize these networks? How do we make them more efficient? And now, of course, using generative AI, now we're thinking about how do we understand these things, control them, drive automation. It's really it's so much easier to think about where AI isn't in the network than to explain all the details. It's not when the AI revolution came a couple years back, or at least people thought. I mean, it's the AI lab had been in existence for a long time already, right? We use it. It's a central tool in the way that we drive value for Nokia and beyond.
Yeah, it's funny you say when you alluded to the fact that a couple years ago is when AI came into most people's lives, or at least
Yeah.
that they thought that was the origin story of AI, which isn't exactly true. It's been something that's really decades in the making. What do you think about this moment of time that we're in right now on the AI front? Because I think to the average person, it's very, very overwhelming as far as the pace of change. What is it like actually working inside of where you're working within the labs?
Yeah, I mean, if it's like, what did Einstein say? It's sure you my problems with mathematics are a lot harder. I mean, it's kind of the same thing when you work in the AI business. I mean, it's hard enough to read about it in the newspaper and comprehend, but trying to keep up with it is even harder. I mean, I have a lab of 100 people, and we're, it's very distributed. I'm constantly reaching out and asking them for what's the most important thing that we should be thinking about working on right now, because I think it's impossible for one person. So it's exciting, of course, but um, you have to stay grounded, I guess, because there is real value and real risk associated with these technologies, as I'm sure lots of your readers are aware of. And so it's, balancing a trajectory that takes both of these things into consideration is absolutely essential.
Yeah, I think it's important you bring up the risk because obviously we hear a lot about the opportunities that do exist. The risk as well certainly get a decent amount of attention. But one of the things that you and I spoke about recently was the regulation side of innovation. Sometimes people think that those things don't go hand in hand, and there certainly is this conversation that's happening right now, like less regulation means more growth. What is your perspective on the role that regulation plays when it comes to innovation?
Yeah, I had a university professor that once told me that in a land of constraints, which is the world, right? Optimization is king, and I think that's what AI leads us to. I mean, I think it's a myth, right, that regulation kills innovation. In fact, it's the opposite, as we discussed before, right? It's actually regulation or restriction is the mother of all invention, right? That's why we create, that's why we innovate, is to get over constraints. I mean, you don't have to look much beyond the DeepSeek moment to understand that, the regulation that we thought we were putting in to stop people from innovating had, almost no effect, right? And so I think what's important is we can use regulation to guide where we want to go as society. And I think that that's where regulation plays an important part, right? Is to help us to pick our values, decide on where we want to go, what is fundamental for us, and then regulate in those directions, right? So I think, there is a guiding factor, but we shouldn't think of it as, it's an on-off switch for innovation. It's just that's a misnomer driven by people who have other motives, I would say. So
You use the word myths, and I've actually watched some of the podcasts that you've done in the past and some of your posts on LinkedIn, and you've mentioned the word AI myths in the past, or the term AI myths. Are there any sort of myths out there that you think people should learn about in terms of kind of demystifying some of the misinformation that we have around this AI topic?
yeah, I mean, so we have a whole effort around responsible AI, right? And one of the gentleman, Daniel Crisera, who leads that, is constantly feeding me all these myths, right, around what's happening. I think one of the most interesting ones is this idea that AI is going to take your job, right? And I think many people have said this. I'm not the first to say that, it's not AI that's going to take your job. It's someone who's using AI that's going to take your job. But we actually have the evidence to back that up. They did this research study where they went and they looked at forward-leading indicators of where technology is driving innovation with AI. And what came out of it pretty clearly is that there's just a wealth of opportunities for people to learn to leverage AI and to use AI in their day-to-day life. You don't have to be a mathematician and an AI, specialist to leverage these things and actually change your life. But, everyday people should be using these technologies, and you should understand these technologies, because I think the truth is it's definitely coming, right? You're going to see automation driven by these technologies, but it doesn't have to be the end of what you're doing. It can be the change, the augmentation, or the impetus to build something new. I was talking to my brother recently. He's looking for a little bit of a career change right now, and I was saying, like, grab the latest AI tool, start chatting with it, and then just own it, right? Don't pretend that you're all of a sudden, someone you're not, but say, hey, I was working with AI, because I think that's just going to be a very normal sentence going forward.
I think it's good advice, and I think you're right in that a lot of people are feeling kind of overwhelmed by some of this tech, and they feel like I can't even enter this space because I don't know everything about AI. And the reality is, at least for most people I interview who work in AI, neither do they. So, it is sort of that rate of change that I think has a lot of people feeling overwhelmed. When you look out into the future and you see and think about some of the work you're doing at Nokia Bell Labs, what are you most excited about right now?
Dramatic pause, right? What am I most excited about? Yeah, I mean, there's so much good stuff out there. I mean, I love solving hard problems, and I think I'm most excited about how AI can augment, the ability to solve problems and to go after things that we previously thought were intractable, right? I think it's just, the ability, whether you're talking about, AI augmented science or AI augmented engineers, or just using AI in a critical part of a tool that you're designing. I just think there's lots of opportunity out there for AI. So, I mean, it's those small things that get me super excited. I mean, I think in our business in particular, it's building networks, understanding networks, deploying networks. It's been so human driven, all the processes, whether you think about who's solving the tickets, who's fixing them. And I think these back end challenges, there's so much going on where AI is going to drive so much cool stuff. So
What about the Canadian AI story? We had a guest on recently where we were chatting about how there have been so many Canadian researchers in AI, and in many ways, the evolution of AI has this strong foothold here in Canada. A lot of Canadians may not know this. What would you say to some of our listeners about the AI connection? I do want to mention you're also Canadian, so there's another connection.
So there is so much going on in Canada, and there has been for a long time, and it's driven a lot by the Canadian government and the way that we have funded research across Canada, right, through different grants, NSERC or whatever, to make sure that we have top talent. I know there's lots of talk about bringing people back, but actually they're here already. I mean, we have Jeff Hinton, who is at the University of Toronto, Joshua Bengio, who's at in Montreal. We had Jan LeCun was actually a postdoc. Iliad Stitzkever, right, was a postdoc also at the University of Toronto. And then you have Rich Sutton, of course, at the University of Alberta. I mean, these are some of the biggest, if not the biggest names. I mean, three of them are, considered the godfathers of deep learning, and they kind of, are instrumental for the world that we're living in right now. So yeah, I think actually the talent is here. I think Canada's challenge is not necessarily finding, keeping, retaining top talent. I think we have it here. I think our challenge is in converting that talent and not having, the quote unquote brain drain of people leaving the country to go find value elsewhere. I think our challenge is keeping people here and creating the real value so that Canadians can benefit from these ideas.
When you look out into the future, I'm not going to ask you to predict the next 100 years at Nokia Bell
Thank
Labs
you.
because that would be a very daunting task and difficult to imagine what lies ahead. But when you think about the next 5 to 10 years and some of the work that you're doing, what do you hope to achieve? You talked about solving big problems. What do you think is sort of a sign of success if you were to look into the future and imagine 5, 10 years down the road?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, it's super easy, I think, to get caught in this kind of short-term trap, right, of going, one innovation to another. But I think there are some huge challenges facing machine learning right now, and I would love to see some solutions to some of these. So, bringing AI into the physical world, right, to understand physical spaces so that, we can ask questions rather than, ChatGPT is, what a Microsoft lawyer would build to understand his database. I'd like to build something that, a house owner can to find something, or a factory owner to, understand what to do, can build. There's lots of challenges around responsibility, how to build responsible, value driven solutions. So things like constitutional AI, I think, are super exciting. And I'd love to see if we were able to evolve to something where we were using AI in the most responsible way possible while still generating value. And then that includes, of course, sustainability questions, right? I mean, these things are pigs when it comes to, their cost on the world from a sustainability point of view. And I would love to see us, solve some of these challenges. So, I mean, those are the things I think long term that I'm most excited about. And I think if we had a check mark in even one of those things, I would be consider it well done.
So, last question for you. If you're talking to the average Canadian or American who is trying to navigate their way through this phase of AI and wondering, hey, how can I use it in my day to day work? How could it help me with my business? How can it help me teach my kids? What would you say to them in terms of some of the things that maybe even you're doing day to day just to keep up?
Yeah, well, don't ignore it, I think, is the biggest thing. It's super easy to put your head in the sand and just kind of expect that things will be okay. So I think start using AI, get an understanding of what it can do, what it can't do, and then, start to get a sense of what you think are the most important things to you, like that are the uniquely human tasks that you will retain for yourselves, right? Whether it's writing, whether it's, hanging out with your kids or whatever. I think it's a balance, but yeah, I mean, the time is now. The tools are out there. They're fun to play with, but they're not everything. So
Absolutely. If people want to learn more about Nokia Bell Labs, where's the best place for them to go?
Yeah, I think everywhere nowadays because it's our 100 year. We have lots of stuff on LinkedIn, lots of YouTube content, our website, Nokia.com, I guess. If you look for Bell Labs, just search Bell Labs, Nokia Bell Labs, you'll find it. Yeah, and then you can find me on LinkedIn, I guess, if you want to follow me.
Excellent. Well, I already do, so I've already taken that step, which is good. Sean, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me again.